what are the things that I need to know, or an Akinyi, Akerubo, and Jerry needs to know before they purchase a piece of land in Kenya?
First thing they need to know?
Yes.
That has to be your goal. What's your intent? You have to be very clear about that. Why do you want the piece of land? Because that will determine the rest of your journey.
We have many Kenyans who just buy land. I'm sure you've heard of that.
Yes.
And I come from the age group or the era where we used to believe that buying land is a thing. It's like asset. So I have friends, I have family who just bought land for the sake of buying land.
Right.
So when you're talking about a purpose, can that be a purpose? It's just people buy land for future, so that it can be a source of income.
Yeah, absolutely. So speculative. If you're looking for a place to park your long-term savings in a hard, fixed, immovable asset that could ideally grow in value passively over time, absolutely. It's the best performing asset in Kenya's history over time. There's no other asset class that has performed as well as land in that regard, but you have to be aware that it's a long game.
It's a long game.
Yes, it has to be very patient. It can't be, you can't expect to buy land now and get rich tomorrow. It does happen from time to time based on random things that happen. You know, government decides we're doing an expressway over here and we're gonna pass it right along your boundary, and it sparks, you know, a spike in valuation, but you can't really predict some of those things. So my advice to people is absolutely, in fact, if you're looking for a rule of thumb, it's 30% of your long-term savings is what I recommend people to have in land. But forget about it for 5, 10, 20 years. The longer you can wait, the better in general.
The longer you can wait, the better.
Yeah.
And what would a Karigo need to consider before purchasing land?
Well,
What is it for development? Now, I already have a goal.
Yes.
She's looking maybe to develop her property or build her house.
Okay.
What do I need to consider when buying that land?
So, you know, if someone says to me, my goal is to develop property, my question would be, what kind of property? So if you're going to say it's a place for me to live versus a place to rent or to do apartments, you know, that will help guide on what you need to have in place. So, you know, if you're looking for a place to live, I'm assuming that's the goal, a place to live. I mean, ideally you have aspirations and goals about where exactly you want to live. Then you focus on looking for land in those particular places. So you're not wasting time looking for land in parts of the city or the country that you're not interested in living in. Now, if you do that, very quickly you will have an idea of what the general price range is.
Yeah.
In which case, then you very quickly need to set a budget and make an assessment about your ability to afford land in the place you want to live. And I think that would be a great place to start.
Is that how generally you can identify land in Kenya, or is there a specific way?
There's all sorts of ways. I mean,
so how do you generally identify land in Kenya?
Generally, it's you know, as we've already said, you know, a lot of Kenyans, because it's a phenomenon we like to understand ourselves, the psychology behind Kenyans' land buying habits and decisions. A lot of it is based on just social culture. And unbeknownst to a lot of us, in my humble opinion, it's based in our history, our colonial history in particular. You know, the land space in Kenya is very unique. Even on the continent, you will not find land dynamics anywhere else on the continent like it exists in Kenya.
Oh. Good dynamics or bad dynamics?
Both.
Okay.
There's good and bad. So if you'll allow me to give a quick history.
Please go ahead.
You know, we got independence in 1963 as a republic. Before 1963, the whole piece of land known as Kenya or Kenya belonged to Her Majesty the Queen, the late Elizabeth II, or whoever was sitting on the throne at the time. And at that point, what had happened is a lot of people got displaced from their ancestral lands, Most prominently in Kenya, it's the Kikuyu community who got displaced because they happen to occupy the most agriculturally productive lands that were desirable to the colonial masters. Hence, this thing we called, or we learned in history about the White Highlands.
Yes.
Those were predominantly Kikuyu community ancestral lands. Some of the Kalenjin community members did get affected by that, Kericho and the likes. In fact, a lot of the white settler farmer descendants are still here owning a lot of these pieces of land. But what that did is, at independence, when all the land was given back to this new republic, the land moved from Her Majesty the Queen to the government of Kenya.
Yes.
Now, the government of Kenya is a custodian, a trustee of the land on behalf of her people. And rather than return the land to the indigenous inhabitants who got displaced by the colonialists, a lot of, I would say, land injustices began to happen because the land was, in many cases, was not given back to the original inhabitants. It was parceled out and given as political favors to loyalists and that sort of thing.
Yes.
And therefore, you find a lot of Kikuyus never got their lands back and had to settle elsewhere. It's one of the main reasons you'll, for example, find Kikuyus in every corner of the country.
Oh, yeah.
Because they never got their lands back. Their land was given to someone who was close to the president at the time, or the powers that be that were.
So they looked for alternatives.
Yes, absolutely. Now, what that did, and I like to explain this sometimes even to my kids, my grandparents' generation, for instance, they're the ones who witnessed the colonialists come take their ancestral lands, got displaced. Their children grew up watching that dynamic happen. 1963 comes along, government gets a land, and a lot of them started to get educated, graduate from technical universities and that sort of thing, get jobs. A lot of them became civil servants to replace colonial workforce.
Yes.
And so I watched, for instance, my mom, that generation, buy every piece of land she could get anywhere that it made sense to her. She's from Kitui, but she was buying land in Syokimau. She tried to buy land in Kileleshwa. Once she's, here, there, everywhere. And I grew up watching that and assume that that's just what you do when you're settling.
Or when you grow up.
When you grow up, when you have a family, it's one of the markers of responsibility that you own land. Not understanding that she was doing that simply to regain what she watched her parents lose, that they didn't necessarily get back. And, there's also cultural nuances to that. For example, you have to have your own piece of land to get buried in. So a lot of the displaced people had to buy land back so that when they do die, they have a place to be buried in and pass on to their children, their grandchildren,
like
and that
an
sort of
inheritance.
thing. Absolutely. So if you don't understand a lot of that history, in my generation especially, it's sort of second nature. It's just what we do when you have a paycheck and some disposable income. Instead of letting it sit in the bank, you buy a piece of land.
Yes.
And what that has done is created this dynamic of aggressive land investment, especially speculative. And therefore, now we have a classification of landowners known as absentee landowners,
Yes.
as according to the government, because you own tracts of land here, there, or plots of land all over the place that you don't necessarily live on or use.
Or even develop.
Absolutely, because you're just holding it to pass on to your future descendants. And then that has also, in a positive sense, created an economic opportunity for capital gains over time, because the more people are buying, the higher the prices go. Whether or not the land is being used is immaterial. So, that's my 2 cents about the dynamic around land buying and why Kenyans are famous for buying land the way we do.
Now, talking about us buying land, and I like that background because some of us maybe have missed out. I don't know why people have been buying land. Some of us have found ourselves in con games, dilemmas, quagmires, because when we go into buying land, we miss out on the due diligence. In your opinion, what does one need to do, or should they invest in a broker, in an agent to go through? Because due diligence, not having a lot of information about the property or the land that you're buying has gotten us into a lot of trouble. Case in point, I, for one, I have been conned like 3 times when it comes to land.
No.
Yes.
Ole.
Yes, from Rongai to Siokimau to God knows another one in Mombasa, some beach plot.
Wow.
Yeah, I assume that I've bought this land.
Yeah.
I have done the due diligence. I have even checked in the lands, or what do they call the registry.
Yes.
I'm seeing that this land is owned by Mr. Solomon. Then I start making the payments. Along the way, I don't know where Karigo comes out and says, this is my land. Or along the way, I find that we are 7 buyers on the same property.
Right.
What does Barbara out there need to do when it comes, or consider when it comes to due diligence when purchasing land?
Whoa, that's a heavy one. As you know, I'm in the business of buying and selling land. We did a poll once. 60% of our customers, before we ever interacted with them, have been conned at least once.
Yeah.
And
Those ones are good, me thrice.
yes, that's why I said at least. Unfortunately, it seems to be a rite of passage in Kenya. If you're interested in buying land, particularly as opposed to develop property,
Yes.
it seems like everyone has that story, which is a terrible indictment on the system in general. And so my answer to Barbara is, first of all, assuming you know what your goal is, you have a general idea what areas you're going to focus your attention on. First thing you have to do is hire a licensed advocate of the High Court of Kenya, presumably one who deals with commercial and property transactions, what they call conveyancing.
Yes.
Because there's different sorts of lawyers, just like doctors. There's those who focus on litigation, intellectual
their
property, blah, blah, blah. Yes.
But this one is more of land, conveyancing.
Yes.
Okay.
So I know conveyancing is a basic course when they're in law school. So any lawyer could do conveyancing, but there are those who specialize in that. That's what their practice specializes in, or they have a department in their practice that specializes in that. Make sure you work with one with competence in that area. Make sure that they are licensed, and how to do that is to ask them for their license certificate. They have
will
to
share it?
They have to.
Okay.
If a lawyer will not show me their license certificate, which they have to renew every year, I don't touch them.
Okay.
And the reason for that is because if something goes wrong along the way, you have to have a way to hold them to account, because they're the ones supposed to guide you.
Okay.
So first thing I would tell Barbara, find a licensed advocate of the High Court of Kenya who primarily deals with conveyancing or property transactions, and they will help you do your due diligence because they know what to look out for, and it's generally easier for them to do a lot of these things than it would be for you as an individual.
Yes.
So things like doing a search. I know there's a lot of fuss going about this whole digitization process. Ardhi Sasa, you can do searches online. That is only true for a fraction of the properties in the country.
Because sometimes online and what is on the ground is very different.
Very different, yeah. And the fact of the matter is, it's going to take a long time for the registry to clean up the messes that have occurred over time. To put everything on the digital platform so that all the properties are available for searches online. So for majority of us, you still have to do them manually at the local registry. That is vastly easier for an advocate to do than you, because even the interaction with the officers there is different. Because generally speaking, I find that they show better due respect to licensed advocates than they would a random 190. Yeah, so one of the main things that I tell people, work with a licensed advocate. They'll also, beyond the search, get you a certified copy of the green card, which is more important than the search, because when they do a search, what they look at is the green card and tell you what's on the green card. So beyond doing the search, have them get a certified copy of the green card from the registry. and that'll set you off on the right track as far as ensuring that you're dealing with the actual landowner. There's no issues on the title. There's no multiple ownership claims. There's no DCI fraud case. There's no court case, blah, blah, blah. Very important.
Those things.
Yeah, all those things.
If you're joining in, we are the adults in the room. When we come back, we have more questions to Mr. Solomon. And we're talking about what you need to consider, what you need to know before purchasing land in Kenya. Remember, you can also call in on 0719 012 and you can opine on the conversation through social media handles, Spice FM KE on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Also, you know our WhatsApp line, 01102 88162. We are the adults in the room.
Spice up your life. Oh, yeah. I want to take it back just like this.
That's Kate Sweat, Just a Touch. If you're just joining in, this is Spice FM. The show is the adults in the room. Today we have a guest, and this guest is going to be enlightening not only to me, but to the rest of you. He's the MD and the CEO of Goshen Acquisition Limited, and we're talking about matters land. He's Mr. Solomon, and we're asking what are those things that you need to consider or need to know before purchasing land in Kenya. What are your thoughts, or what's your question, darling?
What does it mean if land is leasehold or freehold? Have I said that correctly?
You have, yes.
Okay.
So leasehold is land with a certain kind of title documentation, ownership documentation, which means you have temporary ownership
Okay.
that has a deadline for renewal.
Okay.
Just
And
repeat that.
leasehold is a property or with a title deed that expires.
Okay.
So a lot of urban areas, most of Nairobi that's developed, Kisumu, Mombasa, all of the coast, everything that's beachfront at the coast in Kenya tends to be leasehold because of the commercial application and the revenue opportunity for the government.
Yeah.
Means you have limited ownership, and generally they'll go up to 99 years or 999 years from 1920. Were the original ones. In 2010, the new constitution shrank ownership from 999 years to 99.
Okay.
So it means
Almost a decade.
a century.
Oh, yes, sorry, a century.
Yes. So it means at the end of the 99 years, you have to renew to maintain ownership and use of that land.
Why did they change?
Or what happens?
Oh, what happened? Yeah.
Yes, so what happens if you don't renew or they deny your renewal is they allocate the lease to someone else
Oh, wow.
and you have to vacate. In places like Nairobi, Parklands and such, the lease is even shorter. I think it's about 50 years is the longest that the lease will go for. And you can do anything you would normally. You can build offices, businesses, homes, collect rent, all that. You can borrow against a title deed as a registered owner for that period of time, and the banks have no issue with that. But at the end of that period, you have to renew your right to use and own
For another
and
50
benefit.
or 99 years.
Exactly.
Is it expensive to do that, or it will be like another cost of land?
It can be expensive depending on what sort of property. Obviously, in Nairobi, what they do is they charge you a percentage of the valuation of
Okay.
the piece of the land. So obviously, places like Westlands, Parklands, CBD, Upper Hill, most expensive real estate in Africa outside of Sandton, South Africa.
Yes, I heard about
is
that.
Upper Hill.
Why is that?
I think just
Prime.
demand, limited space,
Okay.
demand for commercial use shoots up the price. That also has to do with our position in as a country, as a hub for East Africa. So it makes sense for all these corporations and governments to have offices in Upper Hill. So that's pushed up demand for land there. But, these places, obviously, if it's based on a percentage of the value, your renewal fee will be much higher than other parts of the country. But not unreasonable. But because of where they are, it's very competitive. And so you have to be on your game. Apply early. Don't wait for the last minute because you could overshoot your lease period. And then at that point, the governing authority is free to reallocate ownership. So that's leasehold.
Would you advise anyone to buy land on leasehold?
Absolutely.
Or freehold?
absolutely.
Which of the two is better?
Yeah. So did you explain freehold?
Not yet, yeah. Freehold. Yes, that
Era of
one.
original entry.
Freehold means you have absolute ownership for perpetuity, forever,
Oh wow.
right? There are also tax implications on either,
Okay.
right? So for leasehold, you have to pay annual taxes to the local government,
That's the
which now
county
is a
government.
county.
Okay.
Yeah, before it was municipality, city council.
Mhm.
Now it's the county government. You have to pay rates, which is also assessed as a very small fraction of a percentage of the value.
Those are yearly rates.
Yes.
Okay.
You have to pay them
I've
annually.
never understood that. Why do you have to pay land rates and it's your land? I've really never understood that.
Because you presumably are part of a community that requires services that the government is supposed to provide. Things like sewer lines, water, connection to the grid. That's what your rates are supposed to finance, maintenance in a working government.
I like that you added
I'll
that.
qualify that. So those are the systems we inherited.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a lot of mismanagement has happened over time, but nevertheless, they have to collect revenues. And rent is paid to the national government, the Ministry of Lands. Rates are paid to the county government. So leasehold is subject to two,
Okay.
Rent and rates.
rents and rates.
And it's an yearly fee.
Annual, yes.
So that's only, you said it depends. For leasehold, that is a must. For
Yeah.
freehold,
Freehold?
it depends on the location of the property.
Yes. Now, the reason I say it depends is because freehold, strictly speaking, is only supposed to be subject to no rent, which hence the
Okay.
term free.
Yeah.
You have freehold of the land for perpetuity. In fact, if you look at the title deed that says freehold, it says absolute. You have absolute.
You'll make me go look at the titles.
Yes.
This evening.
Check on page 2. But today, in places like Laikipia, for instance, we have actually experienced this with some of the pieces of land that we own, where the county has decided, even though it is technically illegal as per the constitution,
Yes.
that they will levy rates,
Okay.
On free,
even on freehold.
and there's nothing that can be done about that.
There is, but no one wants to take
Challenge.
on county governments. We need people like Okia Omtata
Across the
Yeah.
country.
to take up these causes for some of
Yeah.
us and rally people. But a lot of things happen that way, and because you will be required by the county to pay those to get clearance certificates before property can be transferred, or even get permits to build and blah blah blah, then you're basically subject to paying the rates anyway. Or else you wait for Okia or Mtata or someone else to fight it out in court. Who knows how long it would take before they're told they can't do that. So even though freehold is not supposed to be subject to any tax, rate or rent, we find there are counties that are charging rates for freehold land, but for sure there are no rents on freehold land. The national government doesn't play those games, thankfully. So if you have a freehold property, you will never need to pay tax to the national government.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me pick this call, then we continue.
Sure.
Hello, Spice. 0719-012-600. When you call, please reduce the volume of your radio or your gadget. Now, you're talking about licensing. Let me pick it up from there. And rents and land rates. What are the licenses required if someone is trying to just develop their property? And this is to be development. Barbara here wants to develop a commercial property. Karigo is looking at developing maybe a home. Are there any licenses they need to know that they need to inquire or purchase as they get into this?
Absolutely. And depending on the status of the land, when you buy it, there could be multiple. So, in the industry now, the big craze in Kenya is 50 by 100s.
Yes.
Yeah. 50 by 100 is 1/8 of an acre.
Yes.
Now,
It's kidogo.
it
Depending
depends
on your
on the
need.
need and the use. A lot of the plots of land in CBD, in many cases, are even smaller.
Yeah.
Okay.
When they have,
Someone buys that, then
skyscrapers on them.
Subdivides.
Yes. There's 40 by 80s. I've seen some as small as 40 by 60. Yeah, and that's feet, 40 feet by 60 feet. So on 50 by 100 is 50 feet by 100 feet, which is an eighth of an acre. Now, a lot of these are sold, or buy this piece of land, you can build a home type of situation. That's
Yes.
what the marketing says. But if the title deed is freehold and it's still zoned agricultural, then you have issues. And this is true for majority of the 50 by 100s or even quarters that are sold in Kenya. We sell it to you with the dream or the notion or the idea that you can use it to build your home in
Yes.
Kitengela,
Yes.
wherever. But if it's freehold, zoned agricultural, before you can get permits to develop a commercial property, for instance,
Yes.
you have to change its use. You have to make an application for change of use, which is changing the zoning classification for that piece of land so that it is allowable for commercial use. And if it's industrial or light industrial for petrol stations, whatever the case may be, there are very specific processes you have to follow according to the Physical Land Use and Planning Act of 2019. That's the act that controls that process. And if you don't know, you could find yourself having a lot of difficulty getting permits or having illegally developed properties that are not in a place that's appropriately zoned for that.
I want to ask a question, but we might end up answering it at the next link because I need to take a 30 seconds break.
Sure.
But you were talking about issues of licenses. How can a Karigo or a James out there who is buying land from you or someone else know that this is land for agriculture? Is it written somewhere? Because a Karigo has given me the title.
Yes.
So how can I know its use or the purpose of this land, industrial, agricultural? I need you to explain to us because many of us have found themselves in this place where I bought land, I want to build just for my home, and then I hear it's for agricultural use. And as you were talking, I was thinking like, this is really a long process. How can one resolve that? So I just wanted you to think about it, and in a few seconds I'll be back with you
Awesome.
to answer that question. If you're just joining in, we are the adults in the room. We're talking to Mr. Solomon, the MD and CEO of Goshen Acquisition Limited. And the conversation today is what you need to know or what you need to consider before purchasing land in Kenya. Purchasing land in Kenya seems to be a thing, but the problem is there have been many challenges that many of us have faced, from getting conned, from lack of knowledge, from hearsays, and just doing absolutely the wrong thing. We don't want you to do the wrong thing, so I want you to plug into this conversation through our social media handles, Spice FM KE on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Remember, you can also call in. Plugging, darlings. Yes, all day long, I think of you. Yes, I've been thinking about you when we go along. If you're just joining in, we are the adults in the room, and we've been asking you to plug into the conversation. I see your calls, and I'll be picking them shortly.
Yeah.
And we are asking what you need to consider, or what has been your experience that you'd like Mr. Solomon to answer or to share with you, or just to give you insight about it. 0719-012-600 is the number to call. Hello, Spice.
Hello, Spice. How are you doing?
Thank you, sir. What's your name, or would you like to stay anonymous?
Yeah, I'd like to stay anonymous, but my question is a simple thing, although it's okay. So there is a difference between land rates and ground rates, right? So my question is,
Go ahead, we are listening.
my question is, if I acquired my land via adverse possession, does the land rate start to be calculated from the beginning of the last person who defaulted in paying the land rates? Or
Hi,
from
please
when I
reduce
won
the volume of your radio or your gadget so that we can get you clearly.
Okay, sorry about that.
You were saying?
So it's about the land rates. Yeah? If I acquire a title via, let's say, adverse possession, yeah, then I want to go and clear the land rates. Will the land rates be calculated from the time that the last owner had defaulted, or what the county is saying, or from when the court gave me the title.
Would you like to stay on hold to have the answer?
No, I will listen by the radio.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's answer his question before we get back to mine.
That's a great question. So the county doesn't care who owns the property. What they care is that the rates are paid.
Yeah.
So what they will require, it's actually required in land law that before a property ownership changes or transfer occurs, he says adverse possession. Adverse possession means probably he had to go to court, or it was an auction, or it was awarded to him as a result of a court decision or something of that nature. The county doesn't care. What they look at is a balance owed on that particular property. It's
and who the current owner is.
Regardless of who the owner is. So before the ownership can change from whoever was the owner before to this gentleman,
It needs to be paid.
it'll need to be paid. And it doesn't matter how long it's been accruing, the penalties and so on. Now, thankfully, counties tend to be very cooperative when you're making an attempt to clear rates. You can negotiate discounted rates if you're prepared to pay. I know you've seen ads in the papers, on radio, billboards.
In fact, they're about to start. There's a new
Yes,
government. Every
exactly.
county is a new government.
Towards the end of the year, especially,
Yeah,
they'll
they're going
give
to adopt it.
waivers
Yes.
on penalties for land rates. So as long as there's a balance, it doesn't matter who's buying it. For the transfer to occur, you will require a clearance certificate from the county authority, which they will not issue you until the full amount is paid, whatever is owed.
Talking about balances of land rates of what this gentleman has asked, let me plug it into the question I'd asked earlier of licenses. Is there a way I can know
What the user is?
Yes, before I start buying land, so that I don't
Absolutely.
waste my time getting land for Karigo and it's for agricultural property, yet I am looking for land to develop. Is there a way before me purchasing
Absolutely.
I can find out this? How is that?
This is part of your due diligence, which
With
is
the
why.
advocate now?
Yes.
Or not for me?
Well, you should be aware because unfortunately, in my experience, we've been doing this for 11, 12 years now in Kenya. I find a lot of times I have to educate the lawyers themselves on what to look for. And the reason for that is because I have zero appetite for getting conned.
And it's good you are educating some of us because we didn't know, and some of us have even had a relationship, or we've engaged lawyers and advocates in this process, but still somewhere along the way
things slip through the gaps.
and you can't blame them because they also didn't know.
Yes, which is why earlier on I said identify those who specialize in conveyancing, because they will be generally aware of all the loopholes, the cracks and things. So if you do your due diligence properly, one of the things you should ask the seller of the land before you buy is, you're selling me this, I want to build a home. Am I allowed to use it for residential purposes or commercial, whatever your goal is?
Is it indicated in the title deed or anywhere?
If it's a lease hold title, certificate of title is what is issued for leasehold properties. Yes, the lease will actually stipulate the special conditions of use, right down to how much of the land you can cover with property, how much green space you must have, what your setbacks for the buildings must be from the road. It's very detailed and very specific.
clear.
Yes. Now for freehold titles usually do not have those stipulations because there are freehold residential properties.
Yes.
Where you will find that is on what we call the PPA2, which is a letter of approval issued. PPA2. It's a letter of approval. It's a technical terminology for essentially a letter of approval issued by the county planner when a change of use application is made, which will stipulate all those conditions just like the certificate of title would. It'll say this freehold property, acreage, blah blah blah, title number, blah blah blah, is specifically for residential use. If it's commercial, it'll even tell you the density requirements and so on. So ask your seller.
I ask my seller, and I
They
also
should know.
engage my lawyer
Yeah.
or
To
my
help
advocate
you
to help me.
requisition those documents. It's I will admit, a lot of times even the sellers don't know because they did it the wrong way. They took shortcuts. They bribed someone at the county office to approve its subdivision, even if it wasn't supposed to be.
Yeah,
All sorts of things happen. But you can ask. Now, if there isn't one, if there's no stipulation of the usage, then you can find out whether or not it's possible for you to do that change of use yourself, so that you have the appropriate zoning or user for the purpose that you intend for the land.
What does land conservation easement mean, and how does this affect the choice of buying land?
That's a huge one. It's like riparian land along waterways, but along conservation corridors.
Kenyans heard of riparian.
Yeah, everyone knows about riparian.
3 years ago, we never knew anything like that
The
existed.
green tractors in Kileleshwa and Westlands. Yes. So that's the best way I would describe that. It's the same thing, but for land adjoining conservation corridors, national parks, and that sort of thing.
But we tend to see a lot of people buying or purchasing land from those areas. Is that a loophole or just things that we've cut corners?
I'd say majority of the time.
Because I see estates, if we are honest, we have estates which were no longer there about 5 years ago that have been built just at the edge of the national park.
Yes, in fact, there's a famous one development. I don't know if it's been brought down yet. I think there's court injunctions next to Ngong Forest here in Langata.
And you'll see people moving in shortly.
Yes. So, I mean, it's something that people like to dance around. But the fact of the matter is someone got bribed to turn a blind eye and issue an approval where they should not have issued. One, for the expediency of the developer, and the buyers, the market are not informed. They don't know. They don't even know what to look for. So a lot of us in the industry, and I'll throw myself in that mix because I'm an industry practitioner, are guilty of exploiting the market's ignorance about what they should look for. And a lot of times, even the experts we're supposed to rely on don't really know. So you have to be very deliberate about doing your homework, asking the questions, and being 100% sure that what you're buying is suitable for the use that you intend for it.
True. I want to take you back slightly to matters of valuation. And many of us, when we talk about valuation, because some of us are buying land for storage, for future, some of us bought it, but we want to resell it. And when it comes to valuation, we're very ignorant or we have no information about it. What are your thoughts about someone doing valuation, and what does valuation entail, and where can I not get conned when it comes to valuation when I want to resell my property?
So my question would be, are you doing valuation because you want to buy, or because you want to know
Maybe
what
sell.
price to sell for?
Yes, what price to sell for?
Right. So,
or how much do I have? Like, how much am I worth? Or this thing is worth?
Value.
So, value is generally approached from several perspectives. You could commission a professional valuation by a licensed valuer. Companies like Kenya Valuers, Knight Frank, and the likes. Will generally offer that as a service. It's a very scientific approach for licensed valuers to use. But I tend to just go with what the market says. The market decides the value.
But sometimes the market's overrated. For example, I have seen properties within a span of 1 year like shoot up with over millions of shillings just because the market has decided it. And I sometimes feel like the market is usually influenced because people want to make a quick buck. That's why I was asking matters of valuing, because I feel there are moments you'd want to buy land, and you told us when we started the show, have a purpose as to why you want to buy this land. If you want to buy land at Mlolongo, don't just go looking for everywhere in Nairobi. Go to Mlolongo, survey that area. So I feel like there are areas that, in certain areas, if I'm looking for Runda, I'm looking for Karen, people hike the value. Yes, and I'm looking at buying land where Karigo tells me my land is worth 18 million, and another one tells me 50 million. That's what I'm talking about valuing. How can I know the true value of the place? Because if I was to go with the market, sometimes I feel it's exaggerated because you believe your land is 50 million, has 18 million, and then they're all same area.
I hear you. It's a very touchy subject. So I happen to buy and sell properties in the U.S. before I came back home, because I went there for school, like many people in our generation.
Yeah.
In developed markets, valuations are very transparent. There are websites, for example, you can go to Zillow.com, ZILLOW. It's just one of many such websites where it'll show you a Google image of a neighborhood, whichever neighborhood you pick. It'll have a little bubble
Yeah.
over each home telling you its current market price, what it sold for, the last time it sold for, what the tax value is as far as the government is concerned. It'll show you what the neighbors is, blah blah blah.
And they'll be almost of the same range.
Generally, there's a range.
Yes.
Because of the transparency of data
Yeah.
sharing, which unfortunately doesn't exist in Kenya.
Yeah.
Strictly speaking, if you want to have the truest picture of market value, which means the value that people are paying on a daily basis,
Yes.
trading, buying, selling, KRA would be the right place to go,
Okay.
because they're the ones who collect stamp duty,
Okay.
which is a percentage of the transaction value.
Okay. So they would know what they have collected
Yeah.
They
in a
would.
year or a few months.
Absolutely. A week.
So
They're sitting on a lot of data.
you'd recommend, if I'm looking to know the value of a piece of land somewhere, I would rather consult KRA than start looking at market values of what Barbara is selling, Karigo is selling out
Yes,
here.
unofficially, because unfortunately there are no laws that obligate KRA to disclosing such data. They keep it completely to themselves. I'm not even sure they track it themselves, but
Is that something you noticed?
it's a fact. They're the
Okay.
ones who are the best thermometer for what is happening in the market now.
Yeah.
Because before a property can change hands, stamp duty must be paid.
That's
Yeah.
true.
And that is a simple percentage. It's either 2% or 4%
Yes.
of the transaction value.
Yeah.
So you can work that backwards
And know the whole percentage.
and know
of it.
exactly what people are paying versus what people are advertising. So
Yeah.
I always tell people, asking price and selling price are very rarely the same thing.
That's true.
I can ask whatever I want. Ultimately, what I sell the thing for is the market
market
rate,
price.
because that's what the market is willing to pay for it.
If you're joining in, we are the adults in the room. I see your calls. When we come back, we'll be picking your calls and sampling some of your questions. We're talking about what you need to know before purchasing a piece of land in Kenya, what you need to consider. And today we have someone who that is an expert in that particular field. If you have any question, any query, or something you want to clarify, please free to call in on 0719 012 Remember, you can opine on the conversation through social media handles, Spice FM KE on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Our WhatsApp line is 01102888162. We are the adults in the room. And the conversation today is what you need to know before purchasing land in Kenya. Personally, this has been enlightening because I'm one of those Kenyans who really have gotten the wrath of con men and women in this country. Story for another day. 0719 is the number to call. Spice FM KE on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter is where we are opining the conversation. If you have a question or a query, you can also direct it to our WhatsApp line 01102888162. Karigo, what are you reading?
Hi, I'm 35, married, blessed with 3 kids, all below 15 years. My dad is ill, can't talk. Grandpa died a long time ago, left without dividing land to his children. I need my piece of share. It means that the land's still under my grandpa. Can I, the grandchild, process it? Procedures then. This is Malinya from Ikolomani.
No, he's from Malinya Ikolomani. It's an area.
Malinya, yeah.
Yes. The gold mine lands.
Yes.
I know that piece, that area with the
Kwanzaa,
land.
it might have gold.
Yes, that's
That
That's
land.
why he's very...
Yes, and you know right now we are mining.
Wow.
People are mining in that side. I've seen Chinese that side.
Oh yeah,
2 weeks ago.
it's happening. chini ya
So
maji.
if a man from this area...
Karigo, please get your mind out of there. Let's just answer the. I have already seen.
Yeah, well, that's a very messy situation, sad to say, because you're dealing with a property still registered to a deceased
Yeah.
individual. In that instance, they would need court orders appointing administrators. It's a succession issue, in essence.
Talk about succession issues, because it's really, many people are struggling with it, where I buy land from Solomon,
Yeah.
and Solomon hasn't informed us that, hey, this land is family land. And maybe Solomon's mother was the only living person. And there's Brian, there's Barbara, there's who. And then
Yes.
issues come out because the initial title owner is dead.
Right.
And you've decided to pay a deposit to Solomon.
Yes, yes. Well, mistake number one, I can tell, is you did not do your proper due diligence.
Most definitely.
Because you should never pay anyone who is not registered on the title, ever.
Okay.
Ever.
Even if it's an
Wow.
agent, let's start by that.
Never pay an agent.
The
What are you
agent is
paying an
called
agent
Spice
for?
FM, but they
Yeah.
tell you we are selling land on behalf.
Never
Okay.
pay an agent. In fact, if the agent is not licensed, generally speaking, I stay away from them.
Okay.
There are licensed agents, Knight Frank,
Yeah.
blah, 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 Lloyd Masika, the
Mhm.
usual.
Yes.
Majority of so-called agents are self-baptized agents,
Yes.
brokers. I know I went to a friend's home once, and the house help was brokering a 90 million shilling transaction.
And because you're the lands guy, she was talking to you.
Yes, because I'm the guy of Mashamba. And she's an agent. She expects a 10% commission from the deal. Now, those are unlicensed, informal agents and brokers. It's the largest network, and they can be very helpful in pointing you into a particular direction, tell you what's happening, where the opportunities are.
Yeah.
But you never discuss matters of pricing with agents, ever. Only discuss that with the owner registered on the title.
The person's name who's on the title.
And they need to show you an ID matching the name on the title.
If it's an organization, so
Yes, their name has to be on the title.
like
and
Spice FM, so I need to get the management of Spice FM.
the directors
Okay.
who have mandates to sign.
Okay.
You need board resolutions saying that they have the right to sell the land.
Yes.
You also need to ask them for a CR12, which will disclose
The current.
that they are indeed the current directors.
Yes.
Because certain people can purport to be directors of a company,
Mm.
and when in fact they are not.
Yes.
So ask them for the CR12, their identification documents to match the CR12, which should match the details on the title deed.
Yeah.
If their name's not on the title deed, never discuss pricing, ever. And never pay them. If you have to, because I do understand sometimes opportunities come up quickly and you want to,
You don't want to miss out.
you don't want to miss out, have your licensed advocate
Yeah.
hold the money in trust in
Yeah.
an escrow account, having issued you what they call a professional undertaking. It's basically a promissory note saying, I'm holding this money for Spice FM because they are buying land from seller X. I will not release the money to seller X until the conditions Spice FM has put in place in the sale agreement are satisfied.
Let me ask you, if I am dealing with an advocate
Yeah.
in the matters of land, and in the process, I give my advocate money to put in the escrow account, and he swindles my money or does something wrong, is there a way I can get justice?
Absolutely.
Because that has happened to people in my family, I know.
Yes, absolutely. That's a criminal case. Embezzlement of funds, defrauding a client, or breach of trust of escrow. It's a sacred thing. It's important. It's a very important, I would say, structural implementation in the legal fraternity to handle funds as custodian for the parties involved. If that trust is breached, immediately that calls for disbarment, which you can pursue through the Law Society of Kenya. You have to register or record statements with the DCI. Of course, there's things you have to put in place. You have to provide documentation to prove that you actually put the money in escrow. So wire transfer, receipts,
Yeah.
bank deposits, checks, whatever it is. And you can hold them to account if they are licensed.
Okay.
If they are not licensed,
Yeah.
then that's a whole other can of worms, because you paid someone who was not licensed to receive money.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Stekma is asking a quick question kindly. If you want to sell a piece of land and the title deed has somebody's name, she is late, passed away, what should anyone do? What are the requirements? And you've just answered that.
Succession.
Yeah.
You have to go to court, declare yourself as a successor to the deceased owner, registered owner of record on the title. You'll have to provide the documentation to prove that.
Death certificate, those things.
Yes, death certificate. That's the one document that usually delays that process. Generally speaking, we find that succession hearings take about 12 months to resolve through the
Wow.
court system.
I think that's the
Unfortunately,
shortest time.
Wow.
Yes.
Because some people really are still in court. with
Yes,
such
yes,
cases.
it can take forever. So I tell people it's 12 months minimum, because sometimes we do come across opportunities to buy land as a company that makes sense for our goals and for our customers' sort of needs and desires. And the moment I know there's a succession issue, I tell them, let's talk in 12 months. Let me know where it's at before we can
finish it, then come back
before
to
we
us.
can go forward. Yeah.
Okay.
As sadly, a situation where your lawyer ultimately owns the battle land is so demoralizing. How legal does a lawyer bolt in?
The lawyer owns what? I didn't get that.
It's a sad situation where your lawyer ultimately owns the battle land.
The land in dispute.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he's saying it's so demoralizing, and he's asking, how legal does a lawyer bolt in? Like,
John Jera, we see a question. Please clarify
Yeah.
it so that we can be able to ask it to Solomon. Let me ask a question before we pick any other call. 0719 012 is the number to call. Let's talk about a sale agreement, Solomon.
Yeah.
But before that, let's have this call. Hello, Spice.
Hello.
How are you, sir? Would you like to say your name or stay anonymous?
My name is Robert.
Robert, do you have a question or a query for Solomon?
Yeah, I don't have a question. But then in that,
Yes, what do you like to say?
but I need the number of that guy. Maybe he'll assist me somewhere else.
No problem. Before he leaves, I will make sure he shares his socials and Goshen's numbers so that you can reach them directly. Sawa?
Sawa.
Thank you. 0719-012-600 is the number to call. Spice FM KE on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter is where we are opining the conversation. What's the question?
hello, Spice. What do I need to know as a land settling middleman? Something I've started a couple of months ago in Kajiado County.
Sounds like he wants to be a broker or agent.
Yes.
Which is fine, nothing wrong with that. I would strongly advise him to get licensed,
Yes.
because that gives your customers better comfort. There's etiquette, I would say, protocol to midwifing transactions in that way. You don't want to be a Kenyan guy who will put people into problems.
Yes.
It's actually one of the reasons we only sell what we wholly own. We never act as an agent or a
you make
broker.
sure whatever you're selling is what...
It's in Goshen Acquisition's name.
Okay.
If it's not in our name, you will not hear about it from us, because a lot goes into ensuring that both the seller and the buyer are protected. So first thing I would advise him to do, if he can, is get licensed.
Yeah.
Second thing I would ask him to do is just treat people right. I know a lot of times there's pressure to close the deal so you can get your commission and pay rent, take kids to school, pay hospital bills, whatever the case may be. If your heart's not in the right place, you're going to have a lot of problems and put a lot of innocent people in problems as well. So as long as your heart's in the right place and you're committed to it, all success to you, sir.
Yeah.
Let's talk about land sale agreements. When it comes to land sale agreements, I have seen them in all colors, from one page to several sentences to 16 pages. What are your thoughts, and what does a buyer need to look out for when it comes to land sale agreements?
First thing, make sure it has been drafted or prepared by a licensed advocate of the High Court of Kenya.
Yes.
I'll say that
Not
until
as
people's
Solomon
ears
and
drop
Barbara.
off. No, never try to draft one yourself. Stop being cheap. There's a reason these professionals went to school for 4 or 5 years and got admitted to the bar.
This cheapness is going to cost you.
Yes, there's no shortcuts. Just get a licensed advocate to draft one for you, and they will draft one in a manner that makes sense to you.
Okay.
The terms and conditions in that document should reflect your agreement with the other side of the transaction, End of story. Whether it's 5 pages or 16 pages is immaterial. Does it capture what you intend, the spirit and the intent of the transaction? If you're satisfied with that, not only have it signed by both parties, have it witnessed, and beyond that, make sure it has been franked. It's a technical term for stamping. It's done by the Ministry of Lands, where you submit the document and you pay a fee. It's usually 40 bob or 140 bob, something
Should
like
that
that.
be done before anyone signs it?
No, that's only done after it's fully signed.
Okay.
The reason I tell people to do that, it takes a few days because of the backlog at Ministry of Lands.
Yes.
There's usually a red sort of long stamp on the document.
Yeah.
That protects you in the event of disputes in the future around how you went about acquiring the property, who breached what, who did not con who. If you end up in court and you're presenting documents in court as evidence that are not franked, generally speaking, they're treated as suspect.
Okay.
So have them franked, which is a certification done by the Ministry of Lands that this is an authentic document.
And they're aware about this transaction or this land transaction that is going on.
Not necessarily aware. As you can imagine, there's probably tens of thousands of those that go through their offices on any given day. But it basically gives you comfort knowing that it is admissible as an authentic document, as prepared and agreed and signed by both parties.
Okay.
It's not a forgery. It's not a fabrication by someone else.
Like a certified document.
Yes, it's a
Okay.
certification just done by the government at the Ministry of Lands.
Make sure you do that on your sales agreement.
Yeah.
Adults in the room, I am Lewis and I have a question. When I was a bit young, my dad took us to Ruai and we went to see a plot of land and came back and he said nothing about it. Then last year, my dad passed. And mom now disclosed to us that he had bought land in Ruai. Now we, my brother and I, don't remember where he took us because we were young. How do we locate that piece of land? Why don't you ask your mom?
Maybe the mother doesn't know. You know how men behave in this country. With
Yes, common situation. Both men and women
Yes.
are guilty of this, where they buy properties in secret so that
yes,
the
and people
spouse
even
doesn't
don't
know.
know.
Yeah, you find out later. I know one
Or you
such
don't even
person.
find out.
Yeah, I know an individual right now. He's in his 50s. His father passed away probably 4 decades ago, and he just found out that the dad owned thousands of acres in Laikipia.
What?
Thousands. I'm talking about like 20, 30,000 acres.
I'm calling lawyers. I'm calling DCI. I'm calling
he
everywhere.
just
We're
found
looking
out.
for- We're looking for that land.
And the only reason he found out is because it was listed in an inquiry by government.
Oh, and that's how we found out the
And the
name.
dad was listed as or the late father was listed as
Let
the
me
owner.
pick this call so that you can answer two
Sure,
calls.
sure.
Hello, Spice.
Hello.
Hi, Calvin. How are you?
Hi, I'm good.
Do you have a question for Solomon?
I have 4 questions for Solomon.
Just
Hello.
go ahead, Calvin. He's listening.
Number 1, what are the rules of gated community land?
Number 2.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
You
you.
can hear me?
Or you want to be answered one by one, or you want to, or you want to say them all?
You can note them down and then answer them all. Number 2, we have communal land. Let me use the case of the case study of Maasai community. There are some communal land narratives. Are the land titled? And in case there is a subdivision, what is the process that goes by in the subdivision? And if the lands are titled, in whose name are the titles? Third question is, yesterday there was a trending topic in one of the bloggers' Facebook site, whereby some people came to complain that some land companies sold the land, did the subdivision, but have never issued title deeds, some up to 10 years. So what are the rules, or what would such a client do in case they bought land through a land company and the company has failed to do that to process the title deeds. And the final question: when we've seen real estate companies coming up with apartments, service apartments, they normally build and sell the apartments. In such a case, let's say we have like 100 apartments let me say like a 5 acres of land, 100 apartments. Who maintains the ownership of the land? Because I understand when you're buying a house, you're only buying that particular house. You're not entitled to any land. So who retains the ownership of that particular land? And is there any eventuality where the owner now reserves the right of probably takeover in case probably the buildings are demolished? Because cases happen whereby buildings come down and you bought building, it can't be built again. What happens in such a case, majorly in that particular parcel of land? That's all. Maybe you can answer that.
Thank you, Calvin. 0719012600. Let's start with the first question. I was jotting them down. What are the rules of the gated community land?
And this one also, WhatsApp.
Yes.
Yes.
Let's start with the
Let's
one
start
for
with the
WhatsApp
WhatsApp.
one.
He's even said
Lewis.
that mom
Yeah.
doesn't know the location. She just knows through a friend of my dad's who also doesn't know where it is located. It's only him and his brother that went to see it.
That's a tough one. If there's no records, if the mom has a title deed, a document, a sale agreement, something that would reference the particulars of the title deed, or land reference or land registry number, that would be the best place to start, because that you can work with a licensed surveyor to identify the location of that piece of land and hopefully resolve things from there. Without somewhere to start, I'm not sure what you would be able to do unless someone volunteers information.
Wow.
That would be my advice to Lewis and his mom.
Okay.
Okay, we had a first question from Calvin. What are the rules of gated community land?
Okay, there is no such thing as gated community land. I know he's asking what governs gated communities.
Yes, and I think we can answer the gated community land and apartments, because there's an all in one space.
Sort of.
This is a whole space, Spice FM.
Right.
Solomon has land. Karigo has a house.
Yeah,
I have
space,
a,
yeah.
So either an apartment or a house. Who owns the land, or who owns the title of this land?
Yeah, so there's two scenarios there in my immediate thinking. Number one, if it's a gated community like you'll find in, Runda, Karen, or wherever, generally each home sits on its own property that has its own title deed. But what tends to happen is the developer puts together a set of rules, a homeowner association basically. Karingata, for instance,
Yes.
is an association of homeowners in that region.
Karen and the the lower Langata,
Yes.
is it outer Langata?
There's a set of rules and regulations and conditions that all the inhabitants or settlers within that zone have to stick to. And that can range from anywhere from the minimum size of land subdividable. In Karen, I think legally right now you can't go lower than half an acre.
Yes.
I know they're allowing quarters in certain zones for commercial use, but you can't go lower than half. For a long time, you couldn't go lower than 5 acres.
Yeah, I remember.
And then it came down to acres and then
Yeah.
half. So there's sets of regulations that referee how we all use the land, even though we own the titles separately.
What about apartments? Because now this
Yes.
is one piece of land,
Yeah.
and Solomon is on first
There's
floor,
100
Karigo
people,
in yes.
So for the longest time, I think this was passed last year, Sectional Properties Act, which I'm so excited and happy about. I think
Sectional
it's
Properties Act.
You can just Google that. CS, Honorable Farida Karone,
Yeah.
had the privilege of midwifing that. It's groundbreaking. It's long overdue in Kenya. Thankfully, Parliament passed it. Was envisaged, I think, by the 2010 Constitution, and is just now being operationalized.
Yes.
What that act does is allow each separate apartment or unit to be issued its own title.
Okay.
Oh.
Whereas before,
But you're issuing
The
under-
developer,
under-
sorry,
we're issuing under what?
issuing
The title under what exactly?
a sectional property.
Okay, so we're calling it because it's in the air.
Yes,
You're on
that's
4th floor. She's on
Sectional,
16th
yeah.
floor. Maybe.
So yes.
Okay, that's why we're calling it sectional
So
property.
your floor plan basically
Okay.
is issued its own title
Okay,
based on the plinth area that
Okay.
the whole building sits on,
okay.
right?
Okay.
And that's going to unlock all manner of amazing things for our economy, for the mortgage industry, and things like that. Home ownership, secure
Yes.
ownership, because these have been notorious for developers putting up units, selling them,
Yeah.
and what they typically did is they gave you a sublease of the lease.
Yes.
Certificate of lease is a
Yeah.
leasehold property. You're given, and you're all listed on that one title,
Yes.
but it's still registered in
Under
the name of
new
the developer, who, after selling you guys the apartments, could go borrow against that title from another bank
And then you
do
wake
another
up
project.
in the morning and the bank.
Yes, and
That
if he
happened to
defaults,
us
he gets
in Langata
options.
many years ago. I have passed
Yes,
through things.
it's
God
been
have mercy.
problematic.
True.
So
Yeah.
for that reason, the government has passed the Sectional Properties Act, and they're operationalizing it now
Yeah.
to allow for each individual apartment owner to get issued their own title deed just for their apartment.
The other question he had was, let's talk about communal land when it is subdivided, or what happens when it's subdivided. Can everyone have their own piece of land? And I'll
Yeah.
also incorporate when it comes to family land. We have our father Solomon. You have divided it to your 3 children. Then everyone wants a title of their own. How do they go about that?
So those are two separate issues. Family land cannot be classified as community land.
Okay.
So community land is a technical classification by the government of Kenya and it's usually covering massive swaths
Vast,
of land,
yeah.
thousands of acres
Like
in most instances.
That side of Kajiado past going that side, there's a lot of
Yes,
communal land.
towards Oloitoktok.
Yes.
Masai Mara is a
Yes.
classic example. Parts of Laikipia,
Yes.
parts of Taveta, and Voi,
Yes.
those sorts of regions. These are huge pieces of land. In some cases, they don't have title deeds, but they do exist physically. Their boundaries are known.
So the government knows about
The
them.
government is a stakeholder who holds that land in trust for the communities that live within it.
So no one is getting a title.
No one has titles. In those cases, you'll find a lot of people trading on allotment letters.
Yes.
I'll sell you my
yeah.
allocation within the
Yeah, I've seen
within
that.
the communal
I've
land.
seen that, I've seen that.
Companies, land buying companies were notorious for using this
Yes.
as well, which is where you have the instance just described where a land company sold land, 10 years have gone by, no title deeds.
Yes, that was another question he
Because
had.
they were selling people allotment letters. Those are not reliable as ownership
Wow.
documents. They are private documents managed by a private company, not a
and
national
it's good you've said that
government
because there are
agency.
people who run
Yeah.
or are moving with allotment letters in the name of
I-
someone
I
has sold
avoid
them.
them like the plague. If it's an allotment letter, you're dealing potentially with thin air.
Yeah.
Allotment letters can be replicated multiple times by the directors to do exactly what you were describing earlier. 7, 10, 20 different people paid for the exact same space of land
Yes.
because you can't do a search on allotment letters.
True.
The government is not aware of them.
Okay.
You know, so
So basically, it's
commu-
government land
yeah,
at the end of the day.
yes, and what they have is adjudication officers who manage the land for the community. Now, the community can lobby and petition like is happening around Oloitoktok.
I've also seen in Taveta,
Yes,
they're doing
yes.
that.
For the government to issue the natives, the local inhabitants, title to their ancestral lands.
Yeah.
Which is former President, His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, and his government made a key pillar
Yeah.
of the administration
Yeah.
to issue, I think it was 2 million or 1 million title deeds.
Yeah, I think they did that before he left
Yes,
office.
and I'm sure current President, His Excellency William Ruto, would probably continue that.
Oh, that was part of the communal land.
Yes, so these were communal lands where the inhabitants are known, their ancestral lands, their forefathers were born and buried there, and so forth and so on. But they didn't have title deeds, so the government will do census, a registry will be produced. How many people occupy this space? How much land should each individual be given title to?
Okay.
right? That's what happens. Subdivision is done by a government surveyor, adjudication officers. In fact, that process is referred to as an adjudication process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lydia asks, the guest mentioned that there are descendants of the white settlers still owning land in Kenya. What must happen for the lands to revert back to Kenyan citizens?
What must happen
Wow.
is they.
Lydia wants to take action. Uh-huh.
Yes, no, it's a common
Owns
sentiment
land.
that's been bubbling under the surface for a long time in Kenya. In fact, I think it showed its face, its ugly face,
Yes.
in bits and pieces in the drafting of the 2010 constitution, which lowered the 999-year leases to 99 for that reason, because you have people of foreign origin who own huge swaths of land. It's not uncommon to find them sitting on 40,000, 100,000
Yeah.
acres.
The ones who own ranches.
Yes. Now they own them legally. That needs to be understood. Otherwise, they wouldn't be here.
True.
Secondly, many of them are Kenyan-born citizens. Fine. Their forefathers came as European settlers under the Queen's authority through colonization. We got independence. But at independence, certain treaties and agreements were made for that transition to occur, which included not interfering with their ownership or possession or settlement of the lands that they had been occupying under the Queen's authority. These are legal arrangements. You cannot just decide, these were my ancestors' land, I want them back. That's a recipe for chaos. And also, as I've pointed out, many are third, fourth, fifth generation Kenyan-born citizens, just like you and me.
Yeah.
They have the same rights as you and me around the ownership of that land. So I strongly tell or recommend to people, get over the whole color issue or European descent issue. It's a legal matter. And as long as they own the lands legally, you have to deal with them legally, which is convince them to sell you the land or donate the land. Or
That
whatever they
donation
choose.
part, I don't think so.
Yeah,
You really wait
it's-
for it.
Yes.
Someone is asking, hi adults, please ask Solomon, how can I get around buying my minor a piece of land?
Get around. So I think, just like you were sharing earlier,
Yes,
buying land
yeah.
for your kids.
Yeah.
So
but
in
that was
Kenya-
off air.
Yes.
I think that's what, yeah,
Yes.
we thought we talked about it.
Right. Sorry. Yes, that was off air.
Yes.
In Kenya, you cannot be registered on a title deed unless you are 18 years of age, have a
Yes.
national ID and a PIN number. So if you're buying land for your children, the best way to do that is through a trust.
Oh.
You can create a trust. Again, this is why you need the professional services of a licensed
That's why-
advocate from the
These
High
people
Court
make
of Kenya.
money.
Lawyers, huh?
I highly recommend Anjawala and Kana if someone is wondering who to talk to. They have actually spearheaded this as part of the legal industry, creating trusts for the management of assets for future generations. And you can have all manner of conditions around that. I actually had a Q&A session with the head of real estate for Anjawala and Kana. People can go online and listen to that, where he gives a brief overview of how that would work.
Yeah, I
That's the
had
best
it.
way to do it. The only other way to do it is to own it yourself
Then
on their behalf, but that leaves you exposed in terms of succession. If you get raptured to heaven before your kid is of age, then they have to go to court and get letters of administration and blah blah blah.
Or your wife can decide it's her property she sells
Exactly.
before they reach of
Exactly.
age.
So trusts are the way to go, in my humble opinion.
yeah.
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 What is a pre-location test, and how does this affect the choice of the land buying? Pre-location.
Pre-location test. I've never heard of that term, pre-location. Perhaps they could clarify,
Okay.
but that's a foreign terminology to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
If someone,
Clarify.
oh yeah, the person has had, they need to clarify. As someone asked about your contacts and they've needed to reach you, how can they reach you?
They can reach us on WhatsApp at 07 0001 0001.
Would you like to repeat that again?
Sure thing. That's
Because I've seen another question on the same.
Right.
Yes, I was like, let's just answer it now.
Or they can go to our website www.goshenacquisitions.com and send an inquiry. They'll fill in a little table and say what they would like to get in touch with us for, or
Yeah.
they can just go directly to WhatsApp 07 0001 0001.
To that particular caller and the personal written message, I hope you've listened.
Yeah. What are the different modes of payment to purchase land that are accepted by law?
By law, by law, anything is acceptable as long as both parties are in agreement.
So I can buy land with cows.
Yes.
Barter trade.
Okay.
You
If the sale
quantify it.
agreement says
Yeah.
Yeah.
that, you'll give me X number of cows in exchange for 5 acres. I know an individual, for instance, in late 2000s, was buying a lot of land in Kitengela by giving up his Vitara.
Yes.
He'd give the landowner the keys to his Vitara,
Yeah.
and they'll give him 5 acres.
Yeah.
Neighbor would also say, I also want a Vitara.
A
He'd go
car,
source one, bring it. That's all they want. They didn't want cash. They didn't want anything else. So as
They
long as
wanted a
it's,
ride,
as long
a
as
car.
both parties agree,
Yeah.
and more importantly, if it's written down in a sale agreement, any mode of payment is acceptable. Most commonly is real-time gross settlements, or RTGS,
Yes.
which is a wire transfer, same day wire transfer, bank to bank. I highly recommend that as the best way to pay. Checks are also usable, although you have limitations about the 1 million bobs.
Yes.
A check cannot be for more than 1 million shillings. So
Yes.
if you're buying land for 10 million, you need to write 11 checks. So, wire transfers are the best. And the reason I prefer wire transfers is because your bank and the recipient bank generate internal automatic receipts
Yeah.
that are indisputable proof of the transaction.
Thank you so
you.
much for
Most
Spice.